Hey, everybody. So I decided I've been working on more lyrics for our upcoming single that we're working on. Um, and I did a video a couple weeks ago about the first part, and I had a lot of fun with that. So I kind of wanted to do another one. And I think I'm just going to make a series where, as I'm writing lyrics, I put up videos and kind of talk about what they mean, because I write really vague, and I know gotta stretch. Oh, my head's disappearing. Holy crap. I know that vague lyrics can be kind of frustrating, so kind of fun to see what the process is and see what I'm doing and what I'm figuring out. So this first part I have a video of up on Kardashev's YouTube channel. You can check it out. So I'm not going to re-explain it, although I will say that I changed the last line here. There are a lot in this first section, and a little bit farther down there are some references to Norse mythology, just because I really like Norse mythology. But I had a metaphor here of like going deep into the psyche to learn about yourself, and it was a little too heavy-handed. The original line was "Carry me as I go down into the north," and in in Norse mythology, that's where the realm of hell is supposedly placed. Also, I did it knowing that I think it's in Denmark. I can't remember. It's telling someone to go down into the north or something like that is the same as like saying "go to hell." And so I thought that was kind of funny, kind of cheeky for those who knew it, little Easter egg. But it was too heavy-handed, and I don't want people to be like, "Oh, Kardashev's a Viking band now," because I like me some Viking metal, but it's just not what we're doing. So here's a little edit here as I bury myself in the earth. A little, maybe a little bit less poetic, but interesting none the same, or all the same. All right, so just an overview as to what this song is about for people who might not have seen the last video. These are lyrics for Iota 2, and Iota is its own standalone trilogy. The first one came out years and years ago, and the second one we're hoping to release this year. Pretty much all the instruments are done at this point. I'm sorry I'm bumping the desk and making the camera go crazy. I'm trying not to, but I'm kind of wedged into a corner here. Iota 1 and the Iota trilogy, the whole plan is just examining the human condition, I guess. And that being said, Iota 1 deals a lot with realization of the self and being like in awe at how amazing it is to be human. And then at the end of the song, realizing like, hey, well, that's kind of a pompous attitude to have. So it's like realization and the humbling experience that can come after it. Now, Iota 2 talks a lot about realizing as humans we are one of many. There are a lot of us. We're all special and not special at the same time. So it's like this weird, like, yeah, you're special because you exist and your life has value, but also like, billions of people have been born before. It's not really an inherent accomplishment to be a human. Lots of people just do it. Nobody asks to be one. So it kind of deals with that. And since I write best from my own personal experience, it's through the lens of my own personal interest in my family's heritage, ancestry, things like that. Because I've always been the kind of person who gets a lot of a sense of meaning and place by understanding where I've come from historically, the good and the bad of it. So that's kind of what this explores. So this song is a lot about my ancestry, my heritage in the most immediate sense, and then also how that places one in the world, because you realize that you come from a long line of very interesting people, and yet that's not a special thing inherently, because everybody comes from a long line of interesting people. That's what it is. So if you want to see what the first stanza is all about, check out my the last video I have on the subject. If I haven't already, I'll make it into a playlist on Kardashev. This section here, so all of these lyrics in the first stanza everything's like really crazy in the song. So Iota 2 starts off as kind of a banger. It's very fast guitars. Definitely a different sound than the Almanac, kind of going back to maybe Peripety or even Excipio in some of the aggressive guitars. I'm actually playing Iota 2 very quietly under this video, so if you're paying attention, you can hear some of it. But it continues on, and I'm doing a lot of like really fast highs up here, and I wanted to kind of bring it down because in the story we're talking about going down into the earth, going down into the self, digging into the psyche to learn about who we are. And so these vocals are like these really like driving low kind of guttural vocals to symbolize that. And so here's one of these references to Norse mythology that I was talking about, just because that's what I've been interested in lately. Screaming I fall to the dirt, and from words unto actions I'm led, barely breathing. So this is a mix of a couple different things. So screaming I fall to the dirt, and from words unto actions I'm led. That's a reference to a story in Norse mythology where Odin, I'm sure y'all have heard of him, he sacrifices himself to himself because he's a god, right? I guess you can do that. And when he dies, he assumedly goes to the underworld, comes back with esoteric knowledge, and he falls from the tree. He's, you know, while screaming, he falls from the tree, and that's kind of like through that pain and sacrifice, he gets that knowledge. And I think that, you know, one thing about going back into your history is you learn that you exist as a long line of success and heroic figures, but you also exist as a lot of really bad, really bad things that have happened throughout history, recently and farther back. And you kind of have to look at it all straight on, to be honest with yourself, and to really gain a sense of growth from learning about where you come from. And so that's kind of the experience. You know, you dig in and you're like, oh man, I'm related to these really cool people. Oh man, I'm related to a bunch of horse thieves, which I am. We had some horse thieves back in Spain, where my mom's side of the family comes from. But anyway, screaming I fall to the dirt, and from words unto actions I'm led. So like in reading these stories and in reading these instances of life, that we come from, it affects our actions. It affects our worldview and how we interact with the world. Not everybody. I mean, some people don't really care about their family history, or maybe they are in a situation where there's not much of a way they're going to know. I don't think that's inherently bad. It's just, you know, what it is. Barely breathing. So I don't know if anybody else out there has had this experience, but when I'm like really into something, like be it performing, be it listening to a really good song, researching this kind of stuff, I'll find that I'm so focused on what I'm doing, I like realize I'm short of breath because I'm physically not breathing. I'll just realize like, oh, I forgot to breathe because I'm so focused on what I'm doing. And so that's what that's about. I've had a lot of these experiences where, you know, digging into the history of my family is so fascinating to me that I forget to breathe in a very literal sense. Now this one, so after this, screaming I fall to the dirt, and from words unto actions I'm led, barely breathing. After that comes first one, life which came before death, I am drawn deeper. So this, and I know not everybody gets into this, and I'm not trying to push any agendas here, but this is a reference to, I believe the term is abiogenesis, which is life coming from non-life. I think that evolution and natural selection is just ridiculously fascinating, and in a very scientific. I'm not trying to get like metaphysical or anything like that at all with this song remotely. I write very vaguely and very in very poetic images, but really, you know, when you think about your ancestors, you think that going as far back as you can, you know, our earliest ancestors were some like little brainless cells floating around in the primordial goo. And that's kind of crazy to think. I find that very interesting and very humbling, yet motivating at the same time. I mean, look how far we've come, or how far we haven't come. So first one, that's literally talking about whatever life came from non-life. However that happened, I don't know. I don't think scientists have an answer on that. Maybe they do. Or, you know, if you are wanting to listen to this song from a religious perspective, which you can, more power to you, that might be a reference to whoever the first being would be in through your worldview. Could be either. Doesn't matter to me. Life which came before death. Literally, it's just that's just abiogenesis. I hope I'm using the right term. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. But you know, if life came from before non-life, then theoretically life existed before death. I'm not claiming to be an evolutionary biologist. I'm not trying to teach anybody biology or evolutionary biology here, but it's just kind of cool to think about. I am drawn deeper. So those types of thoughts and those types of realization, to me, that's like what'll keep me up at night. You know, I'll be laying in bed just thinking about how cool it is, how amazing it is that for thousands, millions, billions of years, like if you're alive, you exist because everything before you, to some degree, was successful, and that's unreal. That's unreal to me. Now, we go down here, cool chorus effect. That's so I don't forget. That's so when we're recording these vocals, I don't forget what I'm trying to do. But yeah, like these are going to be all singing vocals here, and cool chorus effect. That's talking about, you know, some just to make it sound big, you know, some vocals down the middle, pan them out, and then you get kind of a big wall of sound. Devin Townsend's really good at that. I'm probably not going to sing as well as he does. Let's be real. He's something special. But I'm going to attempt to do something in that same vein. So this stanza here, or section, brings it a little bit more real world, grounds things a little bit. So needle to the quilt, sweat upon your head, become life. So that's a reference to, my hand's getting lost here. That's a reference to my grandparents on my mom's side. So my needle to the quilt, my grandma, I remember growing up, we had above our couch, we had a huge quilt that my grandma knit. Cheers, Grandma. And it was just the coolest thing ever. And I remember I used to reach up. I used to like be sitting on the couch, sometimes looking up at it, sometimes not. And I used to reach up and I used to touch it. And like I didn't really grow up with grandparents. I met my grandfather on my mom's side once when I was like 4. And then my dad's stepmom, so my step-grandma, she came to visit a very few times, so I never really had like a solid relationship with her. So I didn't really have like that grandparent experience. But I remember touching the quilt, you know, and either directly or indirectly kind of thinking about, I don't know, her making it, her knitting it, the role she played in my mom's life. Obviously, you know, as a kid, I wasn't thinking it in that well of laid out terms, but actually you can see some of her quilt work. I opened up a picture that my, well, if it wants to participate, I opened up a picture that my mom has on her ancestry family tree, and here she is, the woman herself, Irma Lee, quilting. Now, neither of these are the quilt that we had growing up. This is actually a quilt I believe that she was sewing. I'm sorry, not knitting. I don't know anything about quilting. That she made for my sister before my sister was born. So this picture is pretty old. I'm not saying my sister's old. I'm just saying. And then this is another one she made behind her, and it looks like she might have some more down here on the side that she's done. You know, so that was a way, I think, growing up that I felt kind of connected, if not to my grandmother, literally like the idea of her. And my mom always talked very highly about her. So that's what that's in reference to. And sweat upon your head, that's in reference to this guy, Grandpa Bruno Castillo. I told you they were Spanish on my mom's side. So he he had a very sordid life, unfortunately. But he ran a farm. He ran a farm and also worked full time, I think, at a Chrysler factory. And so he was a very hard worker. Like I said, kind of a mixed bag of situations in his life, but we won't go into that. But it's just kind of referencing the memory of these two people. Also, like, so in this picture, he looks like a total hard ass, right? Like, he looks like a champ. Look at that. Look at that belt, the flannel shirt. His favorite color was brown, so he's got that brown hat looking off in the distance. Like, man, so that's a man's man right there. And then here's another picture of him wearing a white hat with a black suit. Look at that little pinstripe mustache. What a goober. You know? But also, look how freaking tall he was, too. I just thought that picture was funny. So yeah, oh, needle to the quilt, sweat upon your head, become life, come alive again. So obviously not literally crawling up from the grave, but like in my memory and in our memory, and in a way, you know, when people watch this video and listen to this song in the future, they'll have that image of, oh yeah, Mark was talking about his grandma, so I'm kind of giving metaphoric life to them again, so they're not forgotten. Oh, Appalachia, sorry, to Sonora, I'm alive for the first time. So not everybody in my family, but a lot of my family history on my mom and dad's side comes from the states that are close to the Appalachian Mountains. And I currently live in the Sonoran Desert. Sonora, I don't know if Sonora is really a word, but it rhymed, so I was like, we'll go with it. So that's talking about how my parents came across the country. And now we live in Arizona. My sister and I are the first people to live here, which sometimes makes it feel a little bit hard to feel rooted locally, especially when big cities are nothing more than a bunch of consecutive commercial signs. But as I drink my commercial beer, you can't escape modernity, folks. But anyway, I'm not against modernity. Technology's fine by me. I'm alive for the first time. So this is just in remembering that I come from the hardship and struggle of other people makes me value my life more. Makes me realize that I can work harder. In fact, there's a quote which has inspired a lot of this song, talking about ancestry, and I can't remember where it's from. I read it on the internet somewhere. So if this is yours, feel free to be like, hey, I said that in the comments, and I'll throw you all the credit in the world. But the line is, and this is not mine, it says, what could overcome you? What odds could defeat you? What measure of despair has your blood not already defeated 1,000 times? I don't even write that good. Jeez, that's nuts. But, you know, we exist because people before us overcame very difficult odds. And I also understand that some people, you know, they don't come from a good family environment. My mom didn't really come from the best family environment, but even for her, it was a lot of inspiration to realize who she wanted to be, which was not reflective of the situation she grew up in many ways. So it's a tough thing. Most things that involve growing as a person are a mixed bag of joy and sorrow, really. So if we scroll down, that's what this is talking about. These unwavering uncertainties, ashes upon my eyes. Let this yawning gap now come to envelop me, ashes upon my eyes. So that's exactly what this is talking about. It's the fact that when you look back, I think that, so on the internet, I lurk on a lot of different forums, a lot of which are ancestry forums or genealogy things. And I think that there is a lot of people tend to romanticize the past, and I think that there's a value to that. I really do, because it lets us kind of filter through to the modern day the things that inspire us, and maybe not bring forward the things that we find barbaric. Like, for example, the Colosseum. Let's love it for history, but let's not build another one. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like that. You know, facing the good and the bad in the history of your life. and then just kind of accepting it, accepting that that is, you know, kind of what informs your current experience in many ways. Doesn't define you. I don't believe that at all. I don't believe that anybody has to be defined by the actions of those who come before them, but, you know, maybe it plays a hand in the cards that you're dealt. I don't know. I really don't know that answer. And that's what that's talking about. Let this yawning gap now come to envelop me. Now, yawning's a funky word. Why yawning? Like, we think of yawning as being tired. Well, the reason that I use the word yawning is because, again, Norse mythology. Peripety had a lot of biblical references, so I just like stuff. I just like stuff like that. So in Norse mythology, the primordial void that existed prior to things existing was called Ginnungagap, and that literally translates to the yawning or the roaring gap, the yawning or the roaring void. And so, you know, just kind of accepting, staring into the void so that it can stare back into you. I didn't come up with that either. But that's what that's about. And Ashes Upon My Eyes, this is representative of... so there's a quote. We're going to look this up because I got to stop quoting people without knowing who they were. There's a quote by Gustav Mahler, and I have no idea who he is. I have no clue who he is. But so if he was an awful person in history, I don't know. Sorry. But the quote by him is, everything's messed up, but I'll just read it. Tradition is not the worship of ashes, but the preservation of fire. So there are two parts to this analogy, that the ashes and the fire are important. Remembering the past is good, but it's not about like reliving the past. Like, I don't think we should all start driving Model Ts again. And so this is like the first half of that quote talking about... so Ashes Upon My Eyes, this represents the frustration with the bad parts of history that we all have in us. And obviously, if the ashes are covering your eyes, you're blind. So this is talking about how if I were only to focus and to live my life based on those bad things, I'd be walking around like a blind person. I would be missing half of the whole story. And that brings us up to the current spot in Iota 2 that I have lyric-wise. But there are some lyrics. There are some lyrics at the end that I wrote. Usually I write lyrics for the end of the song before the beginning, just because I like to make things difficult on myself. But so this is one of the first parts that I wrote. Now, all of this, everything we've looked at so far, is really vague metaphors and analogies, and like if I didn't tell you what it meant, like you wouldn't have any idea, and I wouldn't blame you because I have a hard time writing literal things. Very difficult for me. I'll try to write literal lyrics, and they sound just bad. It's like, apples are red. That's neat. Like that's about how elementary it sounds when I try to write literal things. But I did do a good job in this upcoming section because I wanted to, at the end of the song, bring all the poetry, all the metaphor into one. I wanted to sum up the message of this song in one phrase. I was like, okay, what is Iota 2? What does it mean in one sentence? What is that? So I'll tell you. I'll show you. So it's two parts. And you'll see the literal at the end. Dang, it's hot in here. Holy moly. That's just me. No, it's not. So, ghost of a shadow, what can be done? This I that I am, no roots with no sun. So, okay, we're not to the literal part yet. But, so this is talking about not having any real sense of self or identity. Kind of, I think that I can't speak for everybody else in society. I can't speak for culture. I've spent a lot of time researching politics, religion, science, and I still have no idea what's going on. I'm still as clueless as anybody else. So this is about how I felt. I ain't going to try to tell other people what they're doing because I have no idea. But for a long time, I felt very unrooted, very just kind of floating around. I just like went to work and came home and went to bed, and that just for me was very unsatisfying. Although having a job is very important, and hard work at a job can be very fulfilling. But that's what this is about, Ghost of a Shadow. So I didn't even feel like a shadow. I felt like a ghost of a shadow. And what was I supposed to do about it? This I that I am was no roots and no sun. So if you think about it, if we think about our ancestral line, and we get for wherever you come from on the globe, you know, your ancestral line could go anywhere, and it's probably going to be related to a very beautiful and rich cultural history. So, you know, for me, it might be different for you, but conceptually, I think it's the same. A lot of, and I didn't make this analogy up, but a lot of people view ancestry as a tree, like that's a family tree, right? And so I'm kind of building on that. So your roots are the past. The sun is possibilities. It's what nurtures you. It's hope. It's drive. It's goals. It's, you know, why do we do anything we do every day? It's because we have something that we want to achieve. Ideally, we want to make today better than it was yesterday. We want to be a little bit stronger than we were yesterday. And then, you know, you may wake up tomorrow and you're like pretty much the same person as you were. But 10 years from now, you wake up and ideally you're a vastly improved person, contributing, working hard, treating others kindly. So the roots being the past and the sun being possibility, I in the middle, the trunk, maybe the branches, felt like I didn't have those things. And if a tree doesn't have sun or roots, it doesn't exist, basically. So I felt like I didn't exist, very poetically speaking. So this is actually a really cool part of the song, because we have this build-up, this really beautiful, like Kardashev style build-up, which Nico constructed. He is so good at those. So good at those. Like, I'll go over to his house and he'll be like, hey, I wrote an outro to a song, and I'll be like, I just want the whole song to be an outro, but we can't do it. We can't do it. So this builds into an outro, but haha, it stops. So it builds into an outro, and you think the song's going to be over, but then it drops out to almost silence. It's just like ambient noises and then really quiet blast beats in the middle. And I know that sounds weird, and that's because it is weird. It's really freaking weird. So you think it's going to end. You think I'm going somewhere with these vocals, and then it drops. Here's the reason I did that. So in Iota 1, all the lyrics about how amazing I am as a human being, I am human, conscious thought, infinite landscape of chemical reaction, drops into an empty spot, like 3 or 4 minutes of no vocals. And then there's that really weird, like, bow, 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 bow. If you've heard it, you know what I'm talking about. If not, I sound like a loony bin. And then at the end, there's a very small amount of lyrics where the lyrics are simply, how could I think this? How could I think this? So it's indicative of something happening to the person who's speaking in between that changes their perspective. So the buildup into nothingness happens here, and then it goes back from the nothingness. It goes back into the exact same buildup. So it's a little confusing, and then it goes into the real outro. I am that shadow. From me it becomes. My father is Stephen, and I am his son. So this is what I was talking about. Oh, I gotta readjust my chair here. So this is what I was talking about with bringing it back to literal. So if you think about standing there and looking at your shadow cannot exist unless you do, and your shadow connects with you in a very physical way. You know, the shadow on the ground, here you are standing on it. So in realizing that we all come from something else, be it, you know, our parents, be it the choices that we've made, be it the places that we live, you know, I was like, oh, it's not empty to be a shadow. It means that you come from somewhere. It means that you have an origin. So I am that shadow because I connect to my father and my mother. I'm going to reference my mom elsewhere in the song. Don't worry, I'm not forgetting you, Mom. Eventually, when I have kids, they will be kind of a shadow of me, but also their own individuals. So I am that shadow. From me it becomes. And then the whole song, everything, in one sentence, is my father is Stephen and I am his son, because that's really what it all means. You know, I wouldn't exist unless my dad did. and I'm a result of everything he taught me, of seeing the way he interacted with other people, seeing the way he went to work every day. And even if my dad was a total asshole, which he's not, he's awesome, I would be his kid. It's not, I can't change it, right? The inevitability of our parents is something that I think a lot of us grapple with or love, and no matter what it is in your life, it's something you have to come to terms with. And so the whole song is about how I come from that, you know, and he comes from Harry, and Harry comes from, I can't remember, Charles, I believe. And so the whole song, and it's really cool, because the build up, it'll be a high vocal, of course. My father is Stephen, and I am his son. And then it just goes off into this elegant, beautiful outro that Nico wrote. I remember he does most of the writing musically. I usually just come in and I'm like, hey, do a different thing there. Or like, what if you put this lead? But composition is 99.9% Nico. And so that's going to be the outro of the song. There may be a sung melody in the background after that. But that's where I am so far with Iota 2 lyrics. I'm going to keep working on them. The next time I have anything substantial, I'm going to make another video and put them up here. But until then, ooh, cheers.